Secret Underground. Throughout this series, we're going to explore some wonderful places that very few people have ever seen. With the help of the West's finest explorers, we're going to reveal some of the region's best-kept underground secrets. Underground rivers, factories and follies, coal mines and quarries, tunnels of love and tunnels of war. Secret Underground. Tonight, we're going to take you caving. Later in the programme, we're going to squeeze into the muddy but beautiful Otter hole, where we became the subject of a major international news story and a big cave rescue. But first, the story of a vast city cave, a sea captain, and the death of a vicar. This is North Bristol, and amazingly, it's the site of one of the oldest, deepest, and most secret caverns, just a few metres below my feet, because here is Pen Park Hole. And Graham and Laura and the rest of the team are going to take us down there. The first recorded exploration of Pen Park Hole took place more than 300 years ago. In 1669, Captain Samuel Sturmey, who was a retired mariner and the author of a manual on navigation, was the first to plumb the abyss. At the time, there were some great stories about it. In fact, one of the poems written to celebrate his exploration said that he'd met a goblin in the gloomy depths.
We're now on the edge of the main chamber. The route we've taken in isn't the route that the original explorers took. Captain Sturmey, the hole that he came in, is up behind the edge up there, right up to the surface. He and his companion were lowered down on ropes, down over these slabs that you can see here, down to the ledge, and then down another 30 or 40 metres below me to the bottom of the passage. Whereas we've got extremely strong lights and can see very well what we're doing and where we're going, they would have just had a couple of candles for lighting and would have had no real idea of what was beneath them until they reached the bottom.
4 days after his descent, Sturmey developed a bit of a headache, which he attributed to the cave. That turned into a fever, and he died. He's buried here in the churchyard of St George's in Easton in Gordana, but here's a nice touch. The locals commemorate the navigator every year on his birthday, the 5th of November, with a ring of the bells. Well, of course, we can never be absolutely sure that Pen Park Hole did contribute to the death of Captain Sturmey, but we can be sure that it caused the death, about 100 years later, of the Reverend Thomas Newnham. This tree marks the entrance to Pen Park Hole, and in 1775, the Reverend was here measuring the depths, and he had a plumb line in one hand, and he was hanging onto a tree root with the other, and the tree root gave way, and he plummeted to the murky depths 60 metres below. Now, the Reverend Newnham was a junior canon at Bristol Cathedral, and that very morning he'd been preaching to a congregation in Clifton with these words: "I am counted among those who go down the pit. I am like those who have no help, like those forsaken among the dead. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy."
When the Reverend Newnham fell in, he came in the same way as Sturmey did from the top up here, and he would have fallen and slid all the way for about 70 metres in total down to the bottom where his body fell into the lake. And in fact, it was 17 days before the body was found and recovered. And the way in which the body was found was by one of the men who was at the bottom throwing stones into the lake, one of which didn't splash but hit something else. They peered out, realised that what it had hit was the body, got a rope round and dragged it to the shore, and then managed to recover it from there.
Pen Park still holds many secrets. The water level of its lake has varied by as much as 30 metres, for no obvious reason. The cave is also very unusual in the way it was formed.
Most of the caves that you see are formed by rainwater, obviously falling from the sky and dissolving the rock about below them from above, but this was formed by hot water coming up from beneath in much the same way as the Bath hot springs are today. Most of the caves that you see are a million and a half years old. This, at 250 million years old, is much, much older. You won't see many caves, if any, of this sort of age.
Pen Park Hole is vast. For many years it was the deepest known cave in Britain. It's 60 metres deep in some places and 70 metres wide.
What's marvellous about this cave isn't just its mode of formation, but its position, being underneath a housing estate on the edge of a big city. It's very unusual to find caves as big as this. I mean, this chamber is what, 3/4 the size of the Avon Gorge. But to find one actually underneath a housing estate, with people walking around above, with no real idea of what's under their feet, is quite fantastic, really.
He's right. It's incredible. You'd never know it up here, would you? Extraordinary. And now for a country cave, and another vicar who didn't realise what he was getting into. This is the top of Banwell Hill near Weston-super-Mare. People have mined minerals here for centuries, things like lead, iron and yellow ochre. During the course of that mining, lots of natural caves were found and then lost. On this hill in particular, they found one which became very famous. It was called Banwell Stalactite Cave. It was found in 1757, but by the 1820s, Banwell Stalactite Cave had disappeared. The locals knew it was around here somewhere. There were lots of great stories about it, but the entrance had collapsed and caved in and was completely overgrown. So nobody had a clue where it was. In 1824, the enterprising vicar of Banwell, the Reverend Francis Randolph, came up with a bright idea. He'd find the caves and then charge admission. The genteel holiday makers of Weston-super-Mare would arrive in their hordes, and the money he raised would go towards building a brand new school for poor children. But, amazingly, here in the wilds of Somerset, his plan was thwarted by a pack of wolves and a gigantic brown bear. The vicar did find his stalactite cave, but he also found this. The miners he employed to tunnel a way through to make it easier for his thousands of visitors to get to the stalactite cave stumbled across this extraordinary chamber full of ancient bones. This place became a tourist attraction beyond the vicar's wildest dreams. In fact, at this point in the story, the vicar bows out and the Bishop of Bath and Wells takes over, because this was perfect for him and his religious theories, because as far as he was concerned, this extraordinary collection of bones was proof of the story of Noah and his ark. Well, John Chapman is a caver and a historian, knows all about this place and is fascinated by it. John, why did it appeal to the Bishop of Bath and Wells so much?
Well, at about this time, this was just before Darwin had written his Origin of the Species, and people were looking for evidence to prove the various stories in the Bible. And to the bishop, this was actually the bones of the animals that didn't get into the ark. And he wanted his visitors to come and see them so that they would realise that the stories were true.
So when they first opened this up, what would it have looked like?
It would have been filled almost to the roof with earth, rocks, and all these bones mixed in amongst them.
And it was the Bishop of Bath and Wells who cleared it all up and sort of stacked the bones on the side, was it?
Not him.
Not himself.
No, but it was William Beard was his manager. William Beard was a farmer who gave up farming and seemed to become the manager of the estate, and he did a lot of work here. And he had this chamber emptied, and where the floor isn't a real floor, there's more bones underneath. This is just where they stopped digging. So we're standing on top of more bones. Yes, nobody knows how far down they go, I suppose.
When this cave was first opened up, it was absolutely full of bones. The ones stacked up here are just a tiny proportion of the ones that were found. Now, to the bishop, they told a particular story, and he gave them away. He sent them to institutions all over the world, persuading people of his particular interpretation of the Bible. But of course, the bones have got another story to tell as well, and that's where paleontologists come in, people like Andy Currant from the Natural History Museum in London. Andy, what story do these bones tell you?
They tell me a very different story to the bishop's interpretation, naturally enough. Most of the bones you see behind you here belong to bison and reindeer. And we now believe these were animals that were living in Britain maybe 60, 70,000 years ago. They're native British animals. And they were falling into this cave, probably through holes in the roof. They were dying outside the cave. They're being washed in. The bones were being washed in during spring melts in the early part of the last ice age. And this big stinking pile of bones was attracting local carnivores. We've got here some beautiful bones belonging to some of the biggest bears I've ever seen. This is a lower jaw of an absolutely enormous brown bear, and there's a skull down there just in front of you. And in fact, we haven't got the middle part of the skull, so we can't really show you the true length of this animal. But if we very carefully pick it up, if you look at its face, you can get some idea of this creature, the distance between its canine teeth, this huge nose, and its eye sockets. It's just marvellous.
It is colossal, isn't it?
This animal was bigger than the bison that were living in the area at the time.
So it was huge.
It was absolutely massive. And we know it was a running animal. This was actively hunting these animals that you see behind you. But it's not living here in the cave. It's come in through the roof in the same unhappy way that they have.
Well, it ended up dying here, possibly.
It's died probably outside the cave, and its remains have been washed in.
When all these bones were getting washed in here, what was this part of Somerset like?
It would have been a sort of Arctic desert. These animals were migrating. You're talking about absolutely huge herds. Herds that may have numbered 500,000, maybe 1 million animals moving through the landscape.
Now, this place is a secret to most people, and it was to you once upon a time, and then once somebody introduced you to it, what was your first reaction? How did you feel when you first came down here?
I was thrilled to bits when I first saw this place. I can still remember it. 30 years ago, I came down here and I saw these bone stacks, and I just fell in love with the cave.
Local cavers also love exploring this place, and back in the 1950s, a team broke through to new chambers, putting a bit more meat on the bones of our story, as you'll see. John, what made you think there was more to discover down here?
Well, there was a little fissure in the rock there, and we excavated it and found some more chambers below. And it's called the Baker Extension. And the reason for that is that here's Mr. Baker, who helped us discover it.
This is Mr. Baker, who did the work. I mean, how long did it take you to get through?
2 years. It was started in October 1950, and the final breakthrough into the Ruby Chamber was November 1952.
And the Ruby Chamber is called the Ruby Chamber because?
It's because of the red colouring on the walls and the roof. It's very, very vivid.
To me, these extraordinary red formations look just like the meat that might have fallen from the bare bones above. What did it feel like seeing these chambers for the first time?
Well, you can't really describe it because nobody had ever seen them before, and you were the first people ever to enter it. It was out of this world, really, to see something that nobody had ever seen before.
In part 2, I want to show you the most incredible cave, and it's not just all this disgusting mud that makes it special and completely unique. Stay with us.
Archaeologists investigating a series of mysterious objects stumble across a massive Roman town.
It's so rare to find a new site of this size.
Fantastic, you can see it so clearly.
The town that time forgot, Tuesday at 7:30 on ITV1.
A pact for survival.
You need a book.
The West Country has some very famous caves. Some, like the beautiful show caves at Cheddar and Wookey, are open to the public. But we're going here, to Otter Hole. It's a unique cave with spectacular formations, and it's definitely not open to anyone but experienced cavers. Otter Hole runs from the banks of the River Wye deep underneath Chepstow Racecourse. John Elliott is one of the people who found this cave 30 years ago, and he's leading our team on this expedition.
We have Otter Hole.
Oh, right, okay, this is it, eh? Now, I'm not a caver. This is my first time in a serious cave, but I'm determined to find out what it's really like.
Dear. Is this what you call a squeeze, John?
I'm afraid they get a bit worse, yeah?
They don't, do they?
Dear.
What makes this fantastic cave unique is that it's tidal. It's on the banks of the River Wye, which is off the Severn estuary course, and the Severn has the second highest tidal rise and fall in the world at spring tides. That means 15 metres between high tide and low tide. This cave at high tide fills up with water, leaving behind all that lovely Severn mud. Not great for the complexion, not brilliant for our equipment either. Now what that means, of course, is that not only is this cave very special and extremely difficult, it's also potentially very dangerous indeed.
How are you doing?
I'm beginning to feel like a tube of toothpaste. Squeeze this.
Well, it's a bit like that here.
John, just hang on a sec, because we're seeing all the evidence of the fact this cave is tidal.
It certainly is, yeah.
How did you find out first time around that it's tidal?
Well, we understood that there was a problem with the tide, but I think we really chose to ignore it a bit, and the lessons came hard and fast when on the third trip in, 3 people got caught in this section at the high tide surge, thinking they'd missed it, and they very nearly drowned. They just managed to get out by the skin of their teeth, swallowing a drop of salt water as they came through, and that was this section that we're actually in fact.
Very scary indeed. Anyway, we better press on.
Well, before the tide comes in. You seem to have missed all the footholds, Chris.
Where's the foothold?
Oh, you missed it.
Okay.
There.
There?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Okay, that's the floor.
That's the floor. Thank heavens for that.
Some of the floor, yeah. Not much of the floor, but...
Okay.
Well, that was good, Chris. It was
Well, thank you very much.
Jumping up, I think.
This is
Are you happy?
interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
Happy isn't the first word that springs to my mind. God. Now, down that passageway beyond Laura is the Otter Hole tidal sump. It's effectively this kind of U-bend. It's like a trap that seals the entrance to the dry caves and the treasures that lie beyond. Once the tide comes in, effectively it's blocked off. Now this is where I part company, because from here on it's experienced cavers. Only once John and Laura and Steve have gone beyond that trap, the tide comes in and they can't get out again for another 7 or 8 hours when the tide goes down again. I'm off to clean up and I wish you the best of luck. I'll see you later.
See you later.
Well, that was last summer, and unfortunately, Laura and the rest of the team didn't have the best of luck, because 8 hours into the cave, Laura slipped and fractured her pelvis and her back. And at that point, our film trip became international headline news. I mean, this was one of several newspapers that covered the story on their front pages, because it took 100 cave rescue experts no less than 24 hours to bring Laura to the surface.
Well, when we left Chris, we carried on through the cave, sort of through the area that's affected by the tide, over some boulder scrambles, and then the last sort of big pile of boulders that we had to get through before the formation chamber. I just slipped over backwards and broke my pelvis and hurt my back. Well, my journey out of the cave was very painful. I was on a stretcher for most of it in the spinal board, which was being carried by an awful lot of people sort of passed through the cave because it's very low. Because it's very awkward in places. it was a very long trip out, and everyone was fantastic. You know, the rescuers had to work so hard in these conditions to keep passing the stretcher up climbs and sort of through the narrow twisting sections. Coming through the low sections was quite difficult on the stretcher because they're not very high, and with the stretcher underneath me I was sort of scraping my nose a bit along the ceiling and watching it go past inch by inch. I think it helped a lot that I am a member of Cave Rescue, so I knew that there were people who were very, very competent with all the right equipment who were going to come and help me, and I knew that they'd bring doctors and first aid and everything that we needed. And also, I knew that they would get me out, that, you know, whatever happened, they'd be capable of bringing me out of the cave, and that it was going to end and I was going to come out.
Now, after several months recovering, Laura and the team have returned to the mud of Otter Hole to show us the rest of the cave and complete the filming.
I said last year that I'd come back, and now I've come back, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the chamber because we were so close and seeing the formations for myself.
On our first trip, Laura and our team didn't reach the magnificent halls deep under the racecourse, but this time they made it.
Well, we're here at last in Hall of 30. It's been a bit of a journey here, but we've got here and it is lovely. It's lots of lovely formations, it's really beautiful. I've never seen anything like this in the UK before. Nothing as big as this with so many formations in one place. So, yeah, it's worth seeing.
The formations have developed because there's been no water in this cave for a very long time, and the limestone is about 90 metres to the surface above our head, so all the water coming through the limestone picks up calcium carbonate and then redeposits it in the cave, forming stalactites and stalagmites. There's straw stalactites, there's curtain stalagmites in places. But it's just the scale and the size that is awe-inspiring. Many caves have stalactites and stalagmites, but not in this country generally on this scale. We discovered the cave in 1974, that was the entrance from the river outside, and about a year later we were now trying to find routes up into what we considered there could be an upper cave. We weren't sure there was, but we felt there ought to be. Geologically it was possible. And it was actually the Christmas 1975 that a small team came in just to continue digging and actually made the breakthrough into these passages that we see here. It's just undescribable feeling really, because we cavers, we squirm around in the ground trying to find sort of beauties like this, but it's a once in a lifetime thing.
I could never have got here, but now I'm beginning to see why some people love caving. Otter Hole's Hall of 30 is unique, but this series is full of buried treasure, so join us next week to uncover some more underground secrets.